to my farm in an Amish neighborhood where simple living's valued. She'd be loved and understood. I put her on a treadle stand and coaxed her wheel to turn. I felt her joy and easing with my study and concern. I cleaned her and I oiled her, showed her off to all my friends, repaired the hurts of years, and let her sew again.
So it is the next day, and I came in to check on this machine, and this is the front, and it looks lovely. And I think I screwed up, though, because I turned it over. I'm not showing you yet. I'll show you what I did. I turned it over to the back, and I saw that there was some big clear coat drips that I did not notice yesterday. And so I decided, well, while it's not permanently set, I'll go ahead and try to sand it down. I got all my sandpapers over there. And unfortunately, when I did that, I ended up taking off part of the pink. So it was just right in this area, I had big drips all the way. So I should have just left it, because honestly, who looks at the back and everything? So I think that my plan is going to be, go ahead and let this thing just as is, set, cure, and everything. Because if I try to touch up paint before it's 100% cured, what I've learned is that there's still some chemical solvent evaporation going on, and it could make this not want to stick. So this might take a little bit longer. I'm going to let it cure a couple more days, come back, because I still have a lot of this pink paint, and just apply it in these areas, let that dry for a day or so, and then put a little bit of clear coat over that. So it's not going to be perfect back here, but you know what, it'll be okay. But this is undercoat coming through. Good morning, and it is the next day. I believe that everything was dry enough I could get started. So what I did, I want to show you, everything, it's still wet up here, but I sanded where those drips were. It's not perfect, but it's a lot better than it was. And then with my spray paint, I sprayed some into one of my little metal tins, because I can clean that out when I'm done. And I can put another one on top to keep it good. And then with just a small artist brush, I can go back in and put several layers over this little part right here. And once I have it coated where I think it's going to be good, and you can see I have probably one more coat to put on here, let that dry completely, and then give it a light sanding so that the textures all blend. And while I was doing this, I used a 400 grit sandpaper, and I have just lightly sanded the entire base, because there were some little air bubbles and imperfections in that I didn't like. So not the entire thing, the column I think was pretty good, it's just there were some air bubbles down here, and the sanding takes that off. I still have a lot of clear coat, but since I'm going to be putting another layer right here, I think that I'm going to go ahead and put one more layer of clear coat on the base here too. Try to be very careful not to get air bubbles, and call that good. So probably later on today is when I'm going to do this clear coat, because it won't take that long for this little paint here to get all completely dry. Okay, everybody, today is the day I'm going to start putting this 127 back together, and I need to tell you right off, I think she's going to be adorable. Is the paint job perfect? Absolutely not. There are drips, and I have, since ordered and received a new pack of brushes that I think will help me not have so many drips next time, but unfortunately, it is what it is at this point, and the finish is going to be shiny. It is going to be rock hard. There are drips, but you know what? It's handmade. That's the aesthetic part of it. But I think that she's going to be adorable, This is her from the front, looking lovely. So I need to get her little box of parts over. I just put a freshly washed polishing wheel onto my little machine here so that I can buff up her parts before I put them back on her. And yeah, let me go get her box and we'll get started. I do have a how-to reference guide that I can keep handy. Thank you, Internet, because downloading manuals is fabulous, so fabulous. I am going to, where am I going to get started? I am going to get started on her nose. I usually don't, but this time I am. So I'm going to start by getting her little thread take-up lever inserted in here, onto this little, putting this hole over that, and there's a little screw that goes into it. My lighting's not exactly right, and I know I need to re-aim my camera, so give me a second, let me get this on and raise the camera up. Okay, so as I put a piece on, I'll just carefully put just a little bit of oil on everything to make sure it is lubed up, but this is moving in that track. There's a little bearing that traces the track. It's going really nicely, so that is good. I'm going to go ahead and put the little plate over the opening. Okay, so next I'm going to put the little presser foot lever in here, and this is that little Y piece that I did not remove, and that the presser foot needs to be in place so it can lift that little Y when it's lifted up. So let me go ahead and get that put in. Next I'm going to put in the needle bar. Sorry about the lighting, but there's a little cog here and there's a post on the cog. I don't know if you can see it. So I'm just going to put a touch of oil on that post so that the little bearing that goes over it can move around freely. Pop you on. Hang on a sec, I got to change my angle here. Okay, so now the bearing is on there. So now this little Y-shaped piece slides on that bearing, and over here there's a little part that's going to go up and down in the slot in the side of the machine. Okay. And there's a couple screws that are going to hold this in place. Before I screw anything in though, I'm going to slide my needle bar down. Hopefully it will fit after all of my painting. I may have to tap it just a bit. Okay, I've got the needle bar in and turning it, but I'm getting tired of grabbing this little end over here, so I'm just going to go ahead and put the wheel back on just so it'll be easier. Put a little bit of oil in here. Pop this wheel back on. Okay, that's a lot easier to turn with the wheel on there. I'll do all the other parts later back here. Just wanted to be able to get a nice grip. Okay, so back to the front here. Let me get our presser bar. Okay, so the first thing I'm doing is making sure that I can get my presser bar to move freely. And I can. I have put oil and everything in there, okay? So now that I know I can do that, I need to get this little piece in. I'm just going to slide into the little groove over here on the side. Okay, so this little block here is in, and I have slid the presser bar. But now I need to get the spring in. This spring here slides over the presser bar in and push it all the way down. Hang on, it's not going to want to go very easily. Okay. Okay, so the spring is in now. There's a little washer. I'm going to drop over the top, and then this cap goes on top, and it's the cap that regulates how much force the spring's going to have. So let me twist it down just a little bit more. So now that the cap is screwed on enough, the spring will push this little block back down when I let go of the lever. Now this might not be the right height yet. I'll adjust that height at the very end when I'm fine-tuning everything. I just went to the house and got an extra light. So hopefully now you can see all the parts that I was talking about earlier. Just letting you know. This is that little block I was mentioning, the springs, everything like that. So now I am going to get something to pad the machine so it doesn't get scratched and work on the bottom. I say it doesn't get scratched because even though my clear coat is dry, it is not 100% cured. It's probably going to be a few more days until I would consider it 100% cured. And until then, it's still possible for something, if it was to really jab onto it, to make a scratch. So I'm just going to try to be a little bit careful in the meantime. I have it tipped over on the side here, but I want to tell you, because it's not cured, I have my plates on, but I am leaving them relatively loose right now. If I was to screw it down really tight, it could kind of make an imprint into that clear coat. So that's why this is loose like this, if you see it and wonder. Okay, so I'm down here underneath now, and I'm going to kind of try to reverse the order of how I took everything apart. So I don't know if you remember how dirty this was. This was totally disgusting. And now it's just about like new. So I'm very pleased with how this cleaned up and polished up. So before I get this put on, I need to put the shuttle holder back on it. And there is a little bit of adjustment that can happen in here, not a whole lot, but if I need to adjust at the time that I'm actually getting all the timing set and everything, I'll be able to loosen a screw and move this in or out slightly. Okay, so now that that is back on, I'm just putting a couple drops of oil in here because this needs to be able to turn very freely. And try to just reattach it here. I see a drop of clear coat right there. I am going to have to sand off that little drop of clear coat before I can attach this. Okay, so now that that is done, I just used a little tip on a Dremel to take that off. Ran a tiny little wire wheel inside to make sure the threads were clean. And now I should be able to just twist this in until it is tight. And there you can see the shuttle's going to move back and forth freely. It's not rubbing up on the edge here, so that is good. Okay, I'm going to get my fork put back on, but I know I'm not going to be able to show you a great angle, so I'm just going to explain what I'm doing ahead of time. There's a little cog in there that this fork slides onto, okay? And there's a bearing on the fork. Okay, there's a bearing on the fork. This part here is where that bearing is sliding back and forth so that you can get different stitch lengths. And there's a little nub on here. This is the knob that I have access to on the outside that I can regulate with. And it fits like this, so that when I'm pushing this knob in and out, oops, excuse me, let me pick that up. When I'm pushing it in and out, that's going to adjust the angle of this piece here, which is going to change the position of the fork, which is going to change the stitch length. So let me just get all of that settled in there and I'll be right back. Okay, so I got it on. It's kind of a juggling act getting everything in there, but I got it on. And then you have to tighten up this bolt. But the trick is to tighten it enough that everything holds itself, and there's a washer with some little tabs in there. But if you tighten it too much, it makes it really, really difficult to turn this lever. So I'm basically tightening it up a turn, making sure I can turn the lever. Tightening a little, make sure I can turn the lever. And right here, that's when it's starting to get tough. So I'm going to back it off just a little bit. And now I'm good. Okay, so now I can have a stitch length change. So that is very exciting. I love how clean it looks in there. All right, let me go on to the next part on the underneath here. Okay, so I'm going to put this piece back on. She looks so much cleaner now. There is a nut, an eccentric bolt that goes on. So I need to put this on to the end of the little fork that we just had here. I have not attached, you know what, I'm going to mount this with its hardware here that goes in each of these little places, these little screw holes at the end. These are going to go. I'm not going to get it totally set and timed and positioned properly. I'm just going to get it set in here enough that it's going to hold itself in place while I connect it to the fork. So I have this bolt and nut this side, bolt that side put in, and while I'm here, I'm going to go ahead and try to get some more of this set. This, I think I need to pull this out because I needed to get this bearing in here, and unfortunately I cannot do that right now. So let me unscrew this, slide that bearing in underneath here, and then I'll be right back. And I want to actually get the feed dogs set up and adjusted correctly before I get to the rest of this. Okay, so these are my little feed dogs. I can take this screw out and I'll be able to mount this to this piece that we just put on. So I'm kind of feeding the feed dogs through from the top into that little bracket, but I have to access it to screw it from the bottom here. Kind of tricky. So I can get to the hole for it from the back here. So I'm basically just going to put the plate on over the feed dogs, keep everything loose on the bottom so that I'll know, according to the guide here, how to adjust it. And I just wanted to point out that I am here just for the artistic side of all of this. If you want to learn the proper way to do things and the proper terminology to use and all of that, there are so many other good YouTube channels with people who are very good at that. You know, Bob Fowler, that vintage sewing machine garage, the old Andy Tube videos. That's not my thing. My thing is just playing with them, the joy of cleaning them up, taking them apart, painting them, and making them pretty, and bringing them back. So you can watch how I do it, but I might not always do it the best way. So just throwing that caveat out there. So with the feed dogs adjusted, now I need to attach this linking bar that's going to connect the part with the shuttle onto it to the vertical shaft here. So I need to remove this screw so I can set it on. You know what, let me find something to balance this, hold on. So this bar is flat on one side and curved on the other, and you put it so that the curved side is down, and then the longer screw is over here. It has a little more of a bearing shoulder to it than this side. You can put it with the flat side up, you can, but it won't work because it's going to bind on this little bracket here. Telling you from experience, obviously. I may still need to make some adjustments in here, but for right now I'm going to call that good. Let me just cinch up these bolts right here. All right, let's flip her over. And feed dogs look good. All right, I am just about at the point where it's just the finishing touches. So I'm going to go ahead and put her pink motor back on. But actually, before I put the motor on, I need to put a plug at the end of her wire. So let me do that really quickly. Oh my goodness. Okay, so I just wanted to show you, I use a snap-on plug. They work really well. It's basically a two-part plug. You put the wire in, push it in, slide the cap on. You know, it's pretty trouble-free. I went ahead and plugged it in, and the motor turns on very well. I have a short wire because I'm going to be using a mounting block in the box that I'm going to build for this machine, where you plug the motor and the light into one little spot here, so I don't need a long cord to be able to get there. So that's why, relatively short plug. So I'm going to go ahead and get the bracket and get this mounted. I just screwed my belt guard with the bobbin winder on here loosely, and the motor is mounted on here also loosely. Nothing is cinched up real tight. But I need to get my light on before I can put my plate on back here. So I will be putting another plug on here. I'll probably show that this time. Let me take this little nut off. Okay, so I need to screw all of this back on. See if I can do this with one hand. And once I know it's in place, then there's a little nut here that I need to tighten, but let me figure out its exact placement here. So it's going to go like that. I think that looks pretty good. So now I'm going to go ahead and tighten this little screw here. I need to put the back plate on, which I have polished up also. And this little screw that goes through the back plate, look how pretty that is, goes through here and through here, and screws into the hole in the back. And if I need to turn it and adjust it, I can loosen this little screw and make that tweaking. And it looks like my battery's about dead. So what I'm going to do is go ahead and put a plug on this wire. I'm going to make these about the same length, so right about here. Put a plug on it. And that's going to be it for a little bit until I get a new battery charge. Last night I came in here without the camera and did a little bit of work on the paint. I tried to get most of my terrible drips off and then gave a nice wet sanding to it to try to level it out. It's not perfect, but it's much better. So later on today I'm going to stop by the auto parts store, get even finer sandpaper, the finest I can get, and also get some rubbing compound and car wax. And I think that will finish off her coat, but she's looking good. Also, last night I spent some time getting her plates on, hands, because right-handed it works better. So you can see they slide on pretty well. It's just when you get to that last little part that it gets tight. So, and I think that that's just the nature of it, because if it slid off really easily while you're sewing, it would constantly be sliding off. So, and also, usually when I'm painting, I mask all of this off. This is the first time I did not, because I was thinking, well, how hard would it be just to paint, just to sand it off? Because since all of this was stripped off, I wanted to make sure it was covered. Turns out it's a pain in the neck to get it totally sanded out, because you don't just sand it, but you have to get into the little crevices. So I will, live and learn. I will be going back to my masking everything technique here. Oh, hello, cat. Hang on a sec. You need to get down. Okay. So today I brought up some fabric and a brand new needle and thread, and I am going to try to go ahead and get her timed up and thread a bobbin and see if I can make her stitch. Okay, so quick update. I did get it threaded in hand wound a bobbin with enough thread that I was able to tell that it does sew. So that's very exciting. But I can't show you all that till I get it connected to the electric, because this turns by electric. So what I wanted to show you is this is the block that we're going to be putting in. And my husband is with me in here today. Say hello.
Hello.
He's helping me get a box together for her. So it's going to be a box that is going to have her entire base. And then there'll be a separate compartment over here, which this block is going to be mounted in. But I need to get a new foot pedal on her because that other one that came with her is kind of disgusting and dangerous. So I am going to be reworking one of my Bakelite pedals. I'm going to take it apart and make sure everything is safe and sound in here. And then this Bakelite pedal is going to be connected to this cord that comes from here. So that's where I am. It's going to be noisy in here, so I'm going to turn the camera off. I just wanted to give you an update of where I stand today. Okay, so here is my block. If the light plugged into the light one, the motor plugged into the motor one. Here is my new old Bakelite foot pedal. On the bottom, I had these clear little rubber feet that I use on the bottom of the boxes and the bases. So the ones that came with this were all dry rotted and nasty. So I just replaced it with those, screwed it back on after cleaning, and it looks good. Hang on, let me move the cat off my chair. So I'm just gonna push the button with my hand. And let's turn on the light. Yay! So that is the original light and the original light bulb, interestingly. She's got a brand new needle in her. And another thing is I was having trouble with the bobbin winder not wanting to stay in position because it needs to be up so that this can engage with the wheel. Now, let's see here. And try to hold her and the camera at once. When I pull her down like that, so she's angled down, this is not touching the wheel and the wheel is free to go. But I need to angle her up and engage the wheel. And I think I'll need to put the camera down because I need to do two things at once here. But it wasn't wanting to stay. And so what I ended up having to do is there's a little flat washer that I had to put on the outside under the bolt head over here, right there if you can see. And that's because this bolt has a shoulder on it that's thicker, that's like a bearing, and then it's threaded after that. And the problem that I saw is that that shoulder was wider than this little piece, so that it was sticking out over here, and there's absolutely no way to tighten it up so that it would stay in place. So by putting this little washer behind it over here, it made the bolt stick out just a little bit, and now it's tight enough that I can push it up and it'll stay, and pull it down and it will stay. So I'm very pleased with that. Future Marie here, and I wanted to tell you, while I was testing my machine, I was having a lot of trouble with this pedal. It was overheating, it was getting stuck on, even though the button was up, it was getting stuck on and just running like crazy. So I have an electronic pedal that I had up in my sewing room, and I grabbed that and I put that on because, you know, better to be safe than sorry. And it runs really well right now, so Don't worry, the Bakelite pedal, although I love them, I have labeled it what's wrong with it so that if I ever feel like totally tearing it apart down to the carbon and rebuilding it, you know, I have a project pedal I can work on. But at this point, this machine has a more modern electronic pedal on it. For this medallion, what I ended up doing is after cleaning the medallion, I put epoxy on the back. And I have just glued it on with epoxy and put a piece of masking tape over it to hold it in place. And I'm going to give it the full 24 hours to completely cure before I pull that tape off, just to make sure it does not slide around and it has a really good set. And welcome back. Oops, let me turn these lights on in here. Okay, is that any better? Maybe not. Well, welcome back. And I wanted to show you where I stand right now with this machine. I have her reassembled, and electrically she's all connected, but she can't really function until she's in the box. So my husband and I have been working on boxes. You know, we're new to this woodworking thing, but you know, you learn as you go. So we're figuring out routers and things like that. And so this box was just about perfect, except for the lip that we routed out here was a little bit too low. And when that lip was a little too low, you couldn't slide the plate out, which is necessary for changing bobbins. So he put a little sliver, like an 1/8" sliver of a piece of plywood. Just a little piece of plywood, sand it down, put that on here. And now it works great. But I wanted to show you it's got a separate little compartment here to put the electrics in, the little box that has the lamp and motor plug block. That's going to go in there. And the back of it, I know I'm combining two different woods, which is a huge no-no in woodworking world, but you know, so be it. The back is wider than the front and sides. The front and sides, we had some oak boards that we had left over from when we were working on our house. So use those for here. This is pine, but it's wider because if you ever want to put one of those hinges on, you need a wider board than the front. So that's my thinking there. So I'm going to go ahead, set the machine into the box, get the block, the electric block, mounted over here, and try to get everything finalized on her this morning. So the little block, my plugs are polarized, so they have to go in a certain way. So I plug them in, the light goes into the light, the motor into the motor. The difference is the light will always be on. If you plug your motor into the light one, it's going to take off running, you know. You have to plug the motor into the one that says motor, because then this works as a switch for it, okay? But what I'm thinking is there's a little notch back here that you can put a little screw head into to hold it in place. And I'm going to want the cord that goes towards the electrical outlet to go off the back. And I want the cord that goes towards the foot pedal to go off the front. So I'm going to be setting this block in here in this kind of orientation. I don't know if you can see that, like this, okay? And so what I need to do is figure out where to screw this little screw in. It looks like it's situated right where that cord is. Let me find a pencil. I'll make a little mark. The screwdriver, just gonna screw that little brass screw in. I just remembered I didn't put my little rubber feet on this, so before I do all of this, I need to take my machine back out, go over to my work table, and I've got these little rubber feet, the ones that I used here. I need to screw one of these into each one of the corners here to give it a nice base. So I'm going to do that, and I'll be right back. As usual, it gets more complicated, and the bottom board of this is just this very thin board. And that was too thin for that screw to go through and have just the right amount of head sticking up. So I have cut another piece of this board, which I'm going to put in here. I'm going to wood glue it down so that the two will bond together, and then I'll have a much thicker base for my screw to go through, and then I can screw that on. So you know, it's a sequence thing, that George Carlin sequence. You do this, so you have to do that, and you do that, so you have to do that. That kind of thing, but it's all fun. Okay, so I have it glued in there, and let me see if I can move this machine. So you can see now, with the raised up area, these plates are gonna slide in and out pretty well. The back one is stiffer. It slides really easily in to about 1/4 inches sticking out, and then you have to really push it. But the back one's not supposed to fly out easily, because otherwise, while you're sewing and everything's pushing, your back plate's gonna fly off, and that would be a disaster. So it does come out. If these back plates are ever too stiff, what I do is the front one slides off easier. You get something wooden, like a wooden spoon. I have a wooden handle, and you can just get it started tapping with that, and then it comes out and nothing gets damaged. So that's my 2 cents on sliding plates right now. So with the extra thickness over here, let me move her again. Over here, I have that extra in the, well, you can't tell, the wheel's in the way. Trust me, it's in there. I'm gonna go ahead and get this placed once again so that the cord that goes to the foot pedal is out the front and the cord that goes to the outlet goes out the back. Okay, so I want to update you on my events. I got this screwed, the one little screw to hold the block in, but it was still all over the place. So I just put a little bit of hot glue on the other side, tapped it in. Because honestly, it shouldn't go anywhere. And there's a screw on top, so if anyone ever needs access, they can lift the whole part off the top if you need. But now that this is here, I was thinking, well, what we really need is a nice cover for this. So I took more of this little plywood and cut a small piece right here and sawed it to the right size. And so I was going to go ahead and get it coated. You can see it's very shiny. It's still damp. I have shellac on it. But when I was trying to open the can of shellac, I stabbed my hand with the screwdriver, so I had to run inside the house, get that bandage up, and it looks a lot worse than it is. I just couldn't get a small Band-Aid to stick on there because it's in a weird place right here. So it's the big one, but that's okay. So what I need to do is wait for this to dry. Now what would be perfect is if I had some of those little screws that have the little, it's like you put a screw through a plate that's about like that wide. I know there's a name for it. It's like a hinge kind of thing. You put the screw through and you can turn it so that you can easily open it and lift. I can't find any of those or anything I can substitute for it. So I think once this is dry, I have those pretty little brass screws. I will just carefully put one or two, or probably 2 of them, maybe even 4 of them in here, because really the only time it will need to be removed is if you're changing out the motor or changing out the light, and at that point just get a Phillips head screwdriver and remove it, you know. But that's my plan, is to, once this is dry, put it in place right here. And it's just 1 coat of shellac, so that shouldn't take very long to dry. Okay, I decided I'm only going to put 2 screws in the back, because that's where most of the pressure is from all of these cords coming in back here. So I drilled a couple little pilot holes, and I've got my little brass screws here. And I'm just going to put those in. If after I put these little screws in, it looks like that's not enough, well, I can always add more up here, but I'm just going to start with those 2 back there. I think that's going to stay really nicely, so if we ever need to get out, all you need to undo are these 2 little Phillips head screws and the whole thing pops off. But that's going to keep all of those cords and everything safely and neatly contained and keep anything from wanting to pull out and unplug. So I really like that. I'm going to try to thread her up. Okay, I'm going to test her out. Let's see here, just going to push the button. nice quiet motor. I have the clutch disengaged because I was gonna hit the bobbin. Let me turn the clutch back in. Pop the bobbin winder out. Let's see. Excellent. Okay, let me see if I can wind a bobbin now. Okay, so what I want to show you is you have the spool of thread up here. It comes over through this hook, back down, through this little hook, up through here, and around the bobbin. What I do is I manually wrap the thread around the bobbin about 7 times, and then I pull my tail over here and try to catch it in something. And then as this goes back and forth, it overlaps where I have manually wound, and then I can cut my tail off. And it's hard to do that with the camera going and holding it still, so I just wanted to show you that. So the wheel needs to be touching the big wheel. The little friction wheel needs to touch the hand wheel over here in order for this to turn. So what I found is easiest is if I get it started and then push this in. Okay. And it's kind of a fine line between pushing it too much and having the wheel bogged down and pushing it not enough and then it doesn't catch. So at this point, I just have to kind of leave my finger up there in case it disengages, you know. So you can see it's working fine. It looks like it is feeding the bobbin pretty uniformly, so that's good. I'm not going to wind the whole thing. I think I'll stop right about now because I think that's enough thread to give it a shot. So this is the shuttle case, and you can see there's a little slit that comes this direction. Here's a leaf spring, okay? So I'm going to put my thread in so it is winding across the front towards the left. And slip it in here. Just drop it in. I'm going to put my finger on top to keep that little bobbin from spinning all over. Then I pull this thread down that slit to the very bottom, and then when you pull it back up, hang on a second, pull it back up, it should hook over the tip. There's a very tip of a little sliver of metal down there that it needs to come up at the top of. If it doesn't, try it again. Sometimes it takes a couple goes, so hang on a second. Okay, so this time it did. So you can hopefully see there's a little piece of thread cutting straight across there as I bring it up. And I pull it up until it comes past this little finger here, and that should have it in there. So when I pull this, there you go. When I pull this, it's going to make this little bobbin inside spin, okay? That's what I want. Okay, so with my front plate pulled open, as you want to make sure, hang on, let me put the clutch back in, that this little shuttle carrier is all the way forward. And there is a smooth part here, a smooth flat part. I want that to go towards this curved area here. I'm just going to put it in and let it fall, okay? Leave that thread hanging out, and I'm going to close this up most of the way. That thread is still a little bit loose, and that's good. So now I can go ahead and thread the rest of my machine. This comes down here between my tension discs and up over this little thumb that's sticking out, and then up inside this spring. Okay, then I'm going to put it through the little eyelet on the take-up lever, pull it through this little eyelet here. I think my tension's going to be way too tight, I can tell that. Now I need to thread it from the outside to the inside. Come on, there you go. Okay, I'm going to lift up my presser foot and pull my thread underneath it. Now I should be able to make a turn and have it pull my bobbin thread up. And it did. So now I can stick my scissors under there and just pull that bobbin thread through, okay? And now I'm going to go ahead and stick some fabric in there and try to get her to sew. Well, that looks really good. The tension even looks good. It looks like, hang on a second, I can tell rubbing my fingernails against it that it actually feels very even right now. So I'm going to go ahead. What I have right now is kind of a medium stitch length. I'm going to turn my dial in all the way so it is completely in. And this should be the longest stitch length. And I can tell that my tension is off now. So let me go ahead and adjust that tension. Loosen it just a hair. Cut this thread so it's not bunching up on me. And give her another go. I think that looks pretty good. It's a very straight stitch. Okay, so that is the longest stitch length. That's like a gathering stitch. Let me put it back. I'm going to turn the knob out. So I have 2 of my little threaded grooves visible. Hang on a second, let me twist you up. On these, there's not a number gauge or anything, but you can see the number of threads visible, and you can kind of get used to that. So when I'm making stitches with 2 threads visible, that is a very decent sewing a garment stitch length for me, okay? If I twist it into 1 visible, it's fairly long. Now I can bring it all the way out, and that should be stationary. And it is, okay? All the way out, but I don't want it all the way out. I'm going to go ahead and twist it in and just sew for her for a little while to get everything used to its movement, and I'm just going to go back and forth, fine-tuning the tension and everything like that. So let me turn the camera over here and try to get her adjusted so you can watch what I do. Now these machines do not have reverse, but that's okay. What I usually do when I'm using them to sew a garment without reverse is, I'll go however I want to, lift the needle up. This keeps wanting to flip out of there, hang on a second. And then lift the presser foot, bring my fabric forward in 1 stitch or so, and then just put it down again. And that, it manually scoots it in and brings it forward. After a while, you don't even think about it, you just do it and it's fine. But I love these old machines. Everything is so intuitive. And like with the bobbin winder, let me turn it off here. Well, hang on. When I lift the presser foot, that disengages the tension. So then you can just pull the thread out, nice and lovely. So there's my stitches. You can tell it got more even as I sewed. Sometimes it just takes a while to get used to it. My tension was a little tight over here, but now it's great. But with the bobbin winder, it's the same where you, after playing with it for a while, you get to figure out exactly where that sweet spot is for being able to wind the bobbin but not drag the wheel, you know? It just comes after a while, after using these machines for a little while and everything. It's almost like there's a breaking in process where you get to know each other. But I dearly love them. So I'm just going to keep sewing for a little while, probably fill this whole little thing up or until my bobbin runs out. And I hope you enjoyed her. I think that she's a beautiful little machine, and I hope she makes someone very happy.
I found an antique sewing machine, forgotten and alone. I touched her rusty wheels and knew I'd take her home. I brought her to my farm in an Amish neighborhood where simple living's valued. She'd be loved and understood. I put her on a treadle stand and coaxed her wheel to turn. I felt her joy and easing with my study and concern. I cleaned her and I oiled her, showed her off to all my friends, repaired the hurts of years and let her sew again.